Pardon the interruption. I'm Sam Mulberry,
And I'm Annie Berglund.
and we are here to welcome you to summer 2024 online CWC Christianity and Western Culture. So I'm going to be teaching your course this semester, and Annie is one of my favorite people in the world, and she is a former CWC student, former CWC TA, former CWC professor, and she's going to be joining me for these webisodes, so it's not just me talking to the void, but I actually have somebody to talk with as we're working through elements of this course. Annie, first question for you. We're taking Christianity and Western Culture. What is this course? What does it cover? What are its objectives?
Sure. So, welcome to CWC. So, CWC is Christianity and Western Culture. It's the story of Western civilization, kind of a survey history of Western civilization, but through the lens specifically of Christianity. So, how Christianity began. But we go back further than just the story of Christ. So, we start out in an ancient context. We look at Greek, Roman, and Jewish cultural values that all shaped the world into which Jesus was born. And then from there, we track the story of the growth of Christianity, the expansion of Christianity, and how that gets to today. So it is a massive survey history course. It travels all the way from the ancient world to the 1900s. But in that are a lot of evergreen questions, things like, how do we define our beliefs specifically as Christians, but also just other beliefs about the world, about politics, about other religions, about philosophy, and how do we relate that to others, and how do we identify ourselves within that? So there's these big objectives in CWC to me, and I think one of those objectives is practicing being a historian or a social scientist. And so because this is a multidisciplinary course, and it's taught by professors who are political scientists, who are historians, who are religious studies, we get a lot of great lenses into the past. And the past is hard to empathize with. And so one of the big objectives in this course is to cultivate empathy with the past. So we're going to learn about people from different places and times that are so different from us today as modern Christians, most of us living in the Midwest or from the Midwest. And we want to be able to put ourselves into their perspective and see the world from their eyes, to make sense of the world and why they might have seen Christianity in the way that it was. Another objective is for us to challenge our own beliefs, to sharpen our own beliefs, and maybe even reconsider some of them. And when I took this course as a freshman, there were many things I had never even considered of where I got this specific belief from that relates to Christianity. And so it was a time for me to wrestle with why I believe what I believe. And that is all important because it's helping us shape ourselves. And that's something that we value at Bethel. We don't want to just learn to learn. We want to learn to change ourselves too. So in this course, kind of the third objective, which connects to shaping ourselves, is to asking these big questions. Things like, who am I? If my answer is I'm a Christian, what does that mean about what I believe? And what does that mean about what I do? And what does that mean about who I am to other people around me, people that I know well, or people in my community or in society? And so really, by studying the story of Christianity and its beginnings and how it unfolds over history, we can hopefully come to a better understanding of who we are today in the 21st century. So that's a little bit about CWC. Sam, why do we do CWC online?
I think that's a great question because this is a course that has a long history at Bethel. I took this class in the fall of 1995 when I was a freshman at Bethel. I've been teaching it since 2001. But even when I took this course, it had already been in existence for about 10 years. So this is coming up to, we're a couple years away from the 40th anniversary of this course being part of the core curriculum at Bethel. So it is a long tradition. Traditionally, this course is taught in person over the course of a 16-week semester. It's taught in a largely lecture format, and then, twice a week lecture, once a week in small group. But this summer, we're teaching CWC online, and it's going to feel a little different. For one thing, we're going to be taking this course over the course of 5 or 6 weeks instead of 16 weeks. And part of why we do that is it's going to provide you, because this is an asynchronous online course, it's going to provide you with a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of convenience. It's not that you have to be in a certain place at a certain time, but you have some flexibility with kind of how you're taking this course. Now, at the same time, in this class, we are going to have homework due just about every day, every weekday, I should say. So you should plan on doing CWC every day, but it's not going to be at a particular set time. So I would plan on, about 2 hours to 2 to 3 hours of homework per day doing this course. So it is a 4-credit course being taught over these 6 weeks. But if this was just about convenience and flexibility, that's probably not a good enough reason to teach the course online. I think if you're going to teach a course online, there should be a value added to say, what do we get to do here that we can't do in a traditional face-to-face course? Now, one of the things that is going to be that's different about the online course, you mentioned, Annie, that this class is interdisciplinary. It's team taught. So in a normal semester, there would be 4 professors from different disciplines teaching this course. Over the course of the next 6 weeks, you're going to encounter actually 22 current and former Bethel professors from all kinds of different fields, not only from the humanities and social sciences, but also people from the sciences, people from the arts, people from different aspects of kind of the whole picture of Bethel University. So we're going to get a lot of different voices into this virtual classroom. So I think that's a really important piece, and this class is going to be delivered to you in 3 different ways. The first type of class that we're going to see, some days we'll watch a documentary film that is centered around interviews with these different professors. Think about these documentary films as kind of providing the overarching narrative or story to the course, right? This is when we're telling the story of Christianity and Western culture. Now, those documentary film days are going to be punctuated by days where we go to virtual museums. So we have 8 virtual museums that we've built, and these are virtual spaces that you're allowed to kind of move around and explore. Now, one thing I'll say about the virtual museums is where a lecture or even the documentary films we watch, they're linear, right? They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. The museums don't really work like that. It's really like visiting a museum where there's different doors and different hallways and different places you can go. And we don't expect that you're going to necessarily look at and listen to every piece of content in those museums. We've intentionally built them to be way bigger than you could do or would want to do in a particular day. Instead, this is going to provide you with some choice. There's going to be times when you're working through these museums where we're going to say, pick one of these 3 rooms and go in and explore it and write about things that you find there, right? So sometimes in the museums, you're going to get a chance to make some choices about what interests you to sort of follow your particular curiosity, your particular interest. So we'll have those days. The third type of class period that we'll have is what we're doing right now, which is webisodes. The kind of moments where we take a time out and you and I talk kind of about things that are happening in the course. Annie, can you tell us a little bit about what the function of these webisodes are in the larger picture of this class?
Sure. So these webisodes are a way for you to connect. It's a way to interact. It's a way to support learning visually. So all very practical reasons. But another thing it does is help to model small group discussion. So if this was an in-person CWC course, you would be meeting with your small group once a week, and you would go over the material, so the readings, the lectures that you had that week. And so it's I almost kind of think of it as like an elementary homeroom, like when you would travel around and then you'd end up with the same teacher at the start and end of the day. It's just we're here to help you kind of take all of that information and guide it. So it's nothing new that you're going to be getting here in these webisodes. It's all of the same material, but maybe packaged in a different way, or maybe with new or different perspectives. So we'll often discuss readings, events, individuals, and sometimes even in a more personal way, like how does this impact our lives and how did this change our thoughts on different matters? We will answer questions. We'll dive into readings and terms. So yeah, the point is it's not any new content. It's just a way to dig deeper into the content that you're already being delivered. So given that, what should students think about as they start this online course, Sam?
If I was thinking about advice that I would give a student who was taking this class, the first piece of advice would come down to time management. Like, make sure you're giving yourself enough time. As I said, most days will have assignments that are due at 10 a.m. the next morning. Make sure you're giving yourself enough time to actually watch the film closely, to do the readings, those types of things, because that's going to be a key to doing this well. Students tend to do well in this course if they keep up with the daily homework. If you start to fall behind in that, or don't turn in assignments, that's where students' grades really start to get affected a great deal. So make sure you're giving yourself enough time. If you're thinking about your day, maybe you're working, you're doing other things, make sure you're building in enough time to get things turned in on time. Another thing I would say is, like, go into these class sessions with your eyes open, your ears open, and your mind open. It's really easy to take an online course and kind of be sort of passively like, yeah, I have the video on, but I'm doing this or doing this or doing this. And we all do that at certain times. I would say with this class, the longest documentary film that we watch is under an hour. None of them are over an hour long. Some of them are as short as maybe 30 minutes. So make sure you're actually giving yourself time to listen, to pay attention, to pause and take notes. And as you're doing that, think about the questions you have. I mean, you said an important thing when you're talking about the webisodes. If this replicates small group, this is a chance for us to answer questions. So if you look on the screen here in the lower right-hand corner, you see my email address there. If you have questions you want us to talk about, you want us to dig into as you're preparing for an exam or things like that, email me and we can fold that into the webisode itself. So this is a great opportunity to do that. You can also feel free to email me if you have questions. I'm around most of the time. I check my email really regularly. I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. If you email me late at night, I'm not a late night person, but I'm an early morning person. So you may email me at night and I will get up at like 4 a.m. and email you back. So feel free to email me, ask questions. The last thing I would say in terms of advice is pay attention to the study guide. Another trap students sometimes get into is they think about, well, I'm doing my daily assignment and I am focusing on getting this thing written or this sheet filled out so I can turn it in. And that's fine. But if you only do that, when you get to the exams, you're going to realize that there are other pieces that you haven't been doing. So if you look at the study guide for this course, you'll notice that along with the questions that are due each day, kind of the reflection questions, we have this list of vocab. And you should be working through that. You should, when you go into watching a video or go into a museum, you should be looking for where those vocabulary terms turn up. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is that there are two types of vocabulary in this course. There's the vocab in the black boxes. We call that mastery vocabulary. And then there's the terms in the white boxes, and those are recognition terms. So I wanted to let you know kind of how I would prepare those terms if I were taking this class. For every one of those terms, whether it's mastery or recognition, there's 3 questions that you should be able to answer about all of those terms. First, you should be able to identify the term, say who or what the term is. So that's maybe a sentence or two just explaining or defining what the term is or who the person is, what are the major things that they did. So you should be able to answer that. You should be able to say when the term is, so roughly the century when the event happened or the person happened. This is not a course about memorizing exact dates or things like that, but knowing roughly when the century is, and then knowing where the term is from. And again, this doesn't need to be precise down to like what street in Athens Socrates lived on, but if you just know Socrates is from Athens, or even that he's from Greece, that's going to be sufficient. So for every one of those terms, whether they're mastery or recognition, I would have a spot in my notes where I wrote the term out. I wrote who or what the term is, where it is, when it is. Now, for the mastery terms, the one in the black box, there's one additional and important question you should be able to answer about that, and that is why the term is important or why the term is significant. Because you're going to be doing on exams and on your sort of daily homework, you're going to be writing about significances of those mastery terms. So As you're going through those terms, you should write that out. Annie, how do you think about significance? If you're working on a mastery term, what are the questions you ask yourself, or what are the things you do to make sure you have a solid significance?
Yeah, so for the mastery terms, I think that the significance is arguably the most important part of identifying those different terms, because what it does is it takes everything that you just said, the time, the place, who the individual was, and it makes sense of it and it marries it all together. So it gives us like the context for the individual. It tells us why they're important, not just for their context, but also what's important about that person for this class or for the questions we're talking about in this class. So if we take an example like MLK Jr., who I'll talk about, I think, in the next segment, it's not just enough to say he's a 1960s civil rights activist who wrote Letter from a Birmingham Jail. What you need to do is say, why is that letter important to this class? What are the big questions that that letter is asking or answering? So maybe you bring up things about justice or power or civil disobedience or law and order, all of these themes that are so central to Unit 1. So when you're filling out significance, when you're doing notes, when you are making note cards to study, we always suggest put in a lot more than maybe even what you could say to a friend. Just have a lot of detail in that significance, 4 or 5 points per person maybe, because that person is going to be coming back throughout the course. It's not just in the first unit, but they will be there in Unit 2 and Unit 3 as well. And they're often in many different lectures. So you're going to find a lot of material on significance for those mastery terms on different lectures and different documentaries throughout the museums. So keep those people in mind so that you can keep coming back and strengthening and adding points to the significance. Does that kind of cover that, Sam?
Absolutely, yeah. I would say if you're stuck thinking, I don't know how to do that, there's 3 questions you can ask to each term that I think is really helpful. First, you ask, why was this person important in their own time? How did they affect the world that they lived in? Second question, how do they have a lasting legacy? Why are they important to us today? How did they impact things going forward? And then a third question, since this is Christianity and Western culture, you can ask, what did this thing have to do with Christianity? Does it have an impact on Christianity? Now, for every mastery term, you're not going to be able to answer all 3 of those, but those questions give you kind of an inroads to thinking about potential ways that you could answer you could answer questions about significance. We'll have some practice with this before we get to the first exam. On some of the museum worksheets, we'll actually have you write out significances of terms, and I try to, as much as possible, give a lot of feedback as I'm grading those, so you get a real sense of what you need to do for that before we even get to the first exam. All right, we're almost done with this first segment, but I want to remind you about what your first assignments look like. You have 2 things that are due. First, you have the syllabus quiz. So this is on Moodle, and this is a 10-point quiz that should be very easy for you. Read the syllabus, look at the study guide, watch this webisode. If you hear my voice right now, you're already doing part of that. And then take this quiz, and you can retake this quiz as many times as you need to. So everybody should get 10 points on this quiz. It is due by the end of the day today, June 19th, by 11:59 p.m. Today. So make sure you're getting that done, but you should do well on that. Just make sure you're looking at the documents of the course. The second thing that we want you to do is to go on to the forum link that's under this. And we have a Poodle forum. So create a short Poodle video. And really, this is just introducing yourself. So make a short video. Tell us your name, your major. Tell us where you're going to be this summer, where you're going to be taking this class from. Tell us the thing you're most excited about or anxious for in taking this class, and then tell us something else that's interesting about you. And everybody's got something interesting about them, so tell us something interesting about you. I will start that thread. I will make a Poodle video myself. Starting that thread, I'll answer those questions for me, and then that'll kind of give you a format for what this should look like. So you should post that Moodle video, or that Poodle video on the forum again by 11:59 p.m. tonight as well. Annie, that is all the time we have for this first segment. We'll be back in a few moments to dig in a little bit to one of the big themes of this course. we're back. Annie, we just want to talk a little bit about who we are and about one of the big themes of this course. You and I both have long histories in CWC. We have our own individual CWC stories. We're both Bethel grads. We both took this course. Annie, what is your CWC story?
Yeah, so I was hired in 2011 in the fall to be a TA for CWC after I took the class that fall or spring 2010. I was a history and social studies ed double major, and I TA'd for 4 terms. And I was really like mournful when I couldn't TA for my last term because I had to do student teaching and then graduate. So my career as a TA was sadly cut short. But after I graduated, I taught for a bit around the cities. And then I moved to Korea. I got my master's in international studies from Korea University. And all the while, I kept in contact with Sam. We're pretty good buddies. We chat every week. So it was really nice to stay in contact a bit with him, even from abroad. And then when I moved back to Minnesota to work at the state legislature, there was an opening to teach in CWC in 2018. And so I got a message out of the blue from Sam and Dr. Gertz, and they both were saying, hey, like maybe you would want to come teach here at Bethel. And my mind was blown. I had to reread the message multiple times because I was so excited. So I taught from 2018 to about around 2021, moved back to Korea during the pandemic. But I've been doing summer webisodes ever since with Sam. And it's been so fun. I love coming back to CWC. I find myself thinking about it often, even as an international school teacher here in Korea, teaching different subjects still within the social studies discipline. I often come back to the lessons that I taught in CWC and rehash bits of that for my students here, just because it's like so pivotal and important for me as a person. So that and just being able to teach with my former professors was like a true joy and so scary at first, and I still get nervous. So yeah, that's my CWC story. Sam, what's yours? It's kind of similar to mine in some ways.
In a way, just kind of more so, I think, because there's been more time. So I came to Bethel in the fall of 1995. I was a computer science major. And I took CWC as a freshman because it was required and they just put it on my schedule. And I really fell in love with the course. I really enjoyed it. So I applied to TA. And for me, this course really changed my life. I went from having a very clear sense of what I was going to do. I was going to be a computer programmer, which in 1995 was such an amazing career to go into. But I realized how much I enjoyed TAing for this class, and I enjoyed working with students and talking about the material and talking about the ideas, that I decided to change my major to history to go to graduate school, because my dream was to teach a course like CWC. And then I had that same experience of in 2001 getting an email from my former professor saying, hey, would you like to come back and teach? And so I started teaching here in 2001, and I've been teaching CWC ever since. I'm somewhere in the low 60s for the number of times I've been through CWC. So it's a major part of my life, a major part of my my career. And it's something that I care a great deal about. So this is my 12th year teaching this in the summer. And it's very fun. It's a sort of a different take on this course. Now, the reason that we're bothering to tell these stories about ourselves is not just to waste your time. Maybe you're interested in them, maybe you're not, but I think this touches on one of the big ideas of this class. So the theme verse for CWC is Hebrews 11 through 12:1. So back in the mid 80s, when this course was created, there were 4 Bethel professors who took a January term off, and they were tasked with creating a course for Bethel's new gen ed curriculum. And this is what they came up with. And they selected Hebrews 11 through 12:1 as their theme verse, their sort of guiding principle for the class. Now, if you're not familiar with Hebrews 11, Hebrews 11 is the faith chapter in the letter to the Hebrews. And it is basically a recounting of the people of faith throughout the Hebrew scriptures, throughout the Old Testament. So it starts all the way back with Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel and Abraham, and it sort of lists all of the people of faith throughout time, all the people who lived by faith. And there's this point where the author even has to catch himself and say, like, I don't have time to talk about everybody. Like, I can't just rewrite the Old Testament here. So it sort of like fast forwards, and then it ends as we move in from Hebrews 11 to Hebrews 12:1 with this really powerful image that I think guides this course. So Hebrews 12:1's, they've just been talking about all of these people of faith that have come before us. And Hebrews 12:1 says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. So this image of the great cloud of witnesses, of all the people of faith who've come before us, literally in the clouds looking down on us, because we are surrounded by them as we run the race laid out for us. It's this, almost think about this like a relay race metaphor, right? That they were running the race of faith and they have passed the baton off to us now, and now we are running the race of faith, and they're cheering us on. So one way to think about this course is for us to try to populate that cloud of witnesses. Because think right now, before I took this course, there were certain people in that cloud that I was aware of, but there were a lot more that I wasn't. And what we're going to be doing in this course is kind of picking up where Hebrews 11 leaves off, because Hebrews 11 is written in the 1st century AD, right? There's 2,000 years of people of faith after that. So part of what we're doing in this course is continuing to build out that cloud of witnesses to introduce you to people. So that's partially why we introduce you to us, because we're on this race together. We're running this race together, and we are parts of each other's cloud of witnesses as well. Annie, when you think about this this notion of the cloud of witnesses and some of the people we're going to meet this semester, this summer in this course, who are some members of the cloud of witnesses that you're most excited for students to encounter?
Yeah, well, I love your explanation of Hebrews. And I think I kind of like to think of it as like a religious family tree, like it's a genealogy. And when I know that like for a time, genealogy was like a fad and people were looking into their past and like you could go online and do all that. And I feel like when my family would do it, we would see some people and we're all related to maybe in these genealogies, if the science is right. But you would find some people and you'd read a little bit about them and you'd be like, oh yeah, that's me. Like I see myself in that person. And some other people you'd be like, that ain't me. Like that's not so much me. I know I'm related, but like maybe I reject some of those things from that's part of myself or that part of my family history. So it's really interesting because like there's elements of, well, we're all a part of the Christian community, but also elements of like there's chosen family in here too, or there's people that I really value and speak more deeply and profoundly into my life. So two of those individuals from CWC are kind of like chronological bookends to CWC, but they both happen in the first unit. And that's a part of this class that I hope never changes, because I think it really sets the tone for how we can connect to very different individuals and see how actually similar many of their ideas were. So those two individuals are MLK Jr. and Perpetua. So many students have read Letter from a Birmingham Letter from a Birmingham Jail before, probably in high school. And so there's some familiarity with that reading. There's also plenty of familiarity with MLK Jr. But I like that we start with him because he asks, again, a lot of big questions about justice and how society runs and how Christians should relate to society. What do we do when our faith conflicts with something that we experience in the world around us? What is our responsibility to people because of our Christian faith? How do these often contradictory issues of law and order and justice and serving the marginalized, how are all of these things to be addressed by people of faith? And these same questions are wrestled with thousands of years earlier with Perpetua. So we have Perpetua, who is a Christian in the early church. She's living in a time of persecution in Roman North Africa in 200 AD, around 200s AD. And she's a young mother. She's in her 20s, and she is put to death for her faith. And I think that she's one of the hardest individuals for us to empathize with. It's hard to consider denying your family and your friends and taking persecution with gladness for your faith. And especially as 21st century American Christians, like life is pretty comfortable for us given our faith. We don't really have many constraints on our faith. And I personally have never felt persecuted to call myself a Christian or to worship. I live in that freedom and I'm so happy for it. So it's hard for me to empathize with someone like Perpetua, who does not have freedom in her faith, who is sought out and who is put to death for it. And I think that her struggles also talk about those same values of law and order and justice, but from a context so different from MLK Jr. So again, those two examples are really good for us to cultivate our empathy and to also be able, oh, my cat, sorry, sorry, and to also be able to connect individuals, okay, from across time and space. Sorry about the cat. Sam, what are two people that you would include in your cloud of witnesses?
Well, I'm going to add a third and put your cat in there, because she has worked her way into the cloud of witnesses. Anytime the cat shows up is great. I would say, I mean, I love everything that you said. I would say another North African from a little bit later in the early church, Augustine of Hippo. I like this because we're highlighting things you're going to get to encounter in the next couple of weeks. Augustine of Hippo is one of my favorite people we talk about in this class. He writes a book called Confessions, which is his own spiritual autobiography. So a lot of what we're doing in this segment is kind of talking about ourselves and our own experiences. But I'm so moved by the way that when I read Augustine, who couldn't be more different than me in terms of time, space, culture, he writes about what it's like to be a young person, kind of seeking after truth, seeking after answers, and eventually coming to Christianity. I'm so moved by the questions that he asks and realizing how much although he's so different, he serves as kind of a distant mirror, something that reflects back, and it's like, oh, I totally understand that feeling, or I remember asking myself that same question at that age. So there's something about him that really kind of resonates with me when I read it. And my hope for you students is that as you go through this course, you have your own moments of resonance where you encounter somebody and say, man, what that person is saying or talking about, that actually like reflects something about me or resonates with me. A second person that I really love is from much later in the course, from the 17th century. There's a French mathematician and philosopher named Blaise Pascal. And he is living kind of right in the heart of the scientific revolution. And he's a devout Christian. He's also a mathematician and a scientist and a philosopher. And he's struggling with this notion of like, how do we balance what we know through science and reason with what we know through faith? And he's living in a world where increasingly people are saying science and reason is the thing that matters. That's the thing where we find truth. And how can we rely on faith? And Pascal is trying to hold on to this notion that faith, the things we feel in our hearts, that's not just a feeling, but that's a kind of knowledge, right? So he's going to say that there's the knowledge of the head and the knowledge of the heart, and trying to fight for that balance. And I think what I like about him is he touches on a theme that we're going to see from the very beginning of this course, which is, as Christians, how do you deal with questions of faith and reason? How do those things work together? And we're going to see all kinds of different answers. We're going to see people who embrace reason, people who reject reason, people who try to find different ways to blend those things together. But I think that's a fundamental question and a perennial question. And Pascal touches on that. And I get excited about every time we get into that question, because I think that's an important thing for us to all kind of answer for ourselves. So those are just some of the people you're going to encounter in this course. You're going to get to read from them. You're going to get to interact with them and see them interact with each other, with other people in this class. That is all the time that we have for this segment. We'll be back in a few moments to wrap up the webisode. We're back, and it's happy time. We like to end these webisodes with touching on things that are celebrating anniversaries today. So first off, happy birthday to Pauline Kael. The legendary film critic was born on this day in 1919. Kael was famous for having views on films that ran contrary to her contemporary critics. Annie, what's a film that you think students should watch this summer?
Well, contrary to some of my contemporaries, I would argue that you should watch Face Off. 2 words, 1 slash, face slash off, starring John Travolta and Nick Cage. And spoiler alert, their faces do come off and are swapped with each other. And it's incredible. It's from the 90s. I already watched it once this year, watched it once last year. I think I'm going to watch it annually. It's not good, but in some ways it's good. So if you're looking for something fun with explosives and a ridiculous plot, go there. If you're looking for a really good plot, I would say Bong Joon-ho's Parasite. I live in Korea, so I have to put a plug in for a Korean movie, and Parasite is amazing. Happy anniversary to our national pastime. On this date in 1846, the first recorded organized baseball game was played on Hoboken, New Jersey's Elysian Fields. Sam, as of recording this on May 29th, your Minnesota Twins are 29-24?
30-24. They won yesterday. Yep.
30-24, my bad. What are their chances of winning the World Series?
I love that you're clearly not a sports fan. That was read nice and robotically. I like that.
Hoboken, New Jersey.
if the season were to end today on March 29th, the Twins would be in the playoffs, which all you need to win the World Series is to make it into the playoffs and then be hot at that time. So I'm going to say it's like a 50-50 shot at this point, right? Like they're like, why not? Yep. You might as well have confidence. This is a good time to be a Minnesota sports fan. As of recording this, the Timberwolves beat the Mavs last night. So they're only down 3-1. So I have all kinds of enthusiasm that will probably sound silly by the time you watch this, but I'm going to hold on to that enthusiasm. And finally, happy trails to Manute Bol. The Sudanese-American basketball player died on this day in 2010 at the age of 48. Bol, who stood 7'7" tall, is famous as the tallest person to play in the NBA. Annie, it may not be clear from this Zoom, but you and I are both pretty tall people. Not Manute Bol tall, but we're pretty tall people. What's the best and worst thing about being tall?
Okay, jokes aside, being real, height is a social influence. Like, people do look to you if you're tall. Now, that can also be a curse because a lot of times I feel like I don't have answers for me and people tend to gravitate towards me. I remember you saying once, Sam, that you're like the person that people go to ask like about the time or ask about like directions to get places. And I feel like height is like maybe a factor in that. The worst thing is probably when it's very personal to me, but when my students compare their dad's heights to me, that always feels a little rude. They'll be like, wow, Miss Annie, you're 176 centimeters. So is my dad. And it doesn't feel great. So that's probably the worst for me. Not too bad. Not too bad in the grand scheme of things.
All in all, tall people have it pretty well, right? We're doing okay. We can see a lot further, which is why we get asked for directions. Annie, that is all the time that we have. Students, remember your assignments that are due today. So make sure you do the syllabus quiz, get that completed, get your 10 points on that. And make sure to create your poodle video introducing yourself to the rest of the students in the class. And make sure you take the time to watch the poodle videos made by others. We don't get a lot of opportunity to interact with each other in this course. So this is a chance to learn a little bit about who's going to be taking this class with you. We'll do a few more content related poodle videos as we get a little bit deeper into the course. Please make sure to look at the syllabus, look at the study guide as you're taking that quiz. And email me if you have questions at any time throughout this semester. That is all the time that we have. This is going to be a great summer. Say goodnight, Stacy.